They didn't look at her face anymore, only at the rope. It swayed slightly in the dry afternoon wind, creaking against the rough wooden beam as if even the timber objected to what it was being made to hold. Clara Voss hung there, wrists bound tight above her head, her boots barely brushing the dirt, her shadow trembling beneath her like it was trying to escape without her. The sun had climbed high and cruel, pressing down on the town square until the air itself felt heavy enough to choke on. People stood in loose circles, watching from a distance, not close enough to intervene, not far enough to pretend they hadn't seen. They whispered to each other in low tones, convincing themselves it wasn't their place. Someone had said she stole from the general store. Someone else said she lied about it. The truth had already been buried under fear. Clara's lips were cracked, her breathing shallow, her strength slipping quietly through her fingers as the rope bit deeper into her skin. She had tried to speak earlier, tried to explain, but her voice had dissolved into the heat before anyone cared to listen. Now she just hung there, silent, her head tilted slightly to one side, eyes half closed against the burning light. A man leaned against a post nearby, chewing slowly, watching without expression. Another laughed once, sharp and brief, as if this were some kind of entertainment. The sheriff stood in the shade of the saloon porch, arms folded, saying nothing. That silence spread through the town like permission. No one stepped forward. No one questioned it. And time stretched on, each second heavier than the last. Then, without warning, the sound of boots broke the stillness. Not rushed, not loud, just steady, measured. The kind of steps that didn't ask for attention, but somehow took it anyway. A figure appeared at the far end of the street, walking through the heat as if it didn't touch him. Dust clung to his coat, his hat low over his eyes, his face unreadable from a distance. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at the sheriff. He looked only at the girl hanging in the sun. And as he got closer, the whispers began to die out, one by one, like something unseen was moving through them. He stopped a few feet from her, his shadow cutting across hers, and for a moment, everything held its breath. He didn't rush. He didn't draw a weapon or raise his voice. He simply stood there, looking up at her with a stillness that felt heavier than the heat itself. Clara's eyes shifted slightly, barely able to focus, but something in her expression changed, like recognition, or maybe just the faintest return of hope she hadn't realized she'd lost. One of the men near the post straightened, uneasy now, glancing at the stranger with a frown. "This ain't your business," he muttered, though the confidence in his voice was thinner than before. The cowboy didn't respond. His gaze moved slowly from Clara to the rope, then to the beam above, then finally to the men standing around as if they owned the moment. The silence stretched again, tighter this time. The sheriff stepped forward a half step, clearing his throat, trying to reclaim control of something that was already slipping away. "Town matter," he said, more to himself than anyone else. The cowboy's hand lifted slightly, not toward a gun, not toward a threat, but toward the brim of his hat, adjusting it just enough to reveal his eyes. They were calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't need permission. And then he spoke. Just 3 words. Quiet. Even. Unshaken. "Cut her down." It wasn't a command shouted across the square. It wasn't a threat dressed in anger. It was something else entirely, something final, something that left no room for debate. For a second, no one moved. The man by the post let out a short scoff, stepping forward like he might challenge it, but he stopped when he saw that the cowboy hadn't shifted at all. Not an inch. Not a flicker. The weight of that stillness pressed harder than any drawn gun ever could. Another man looked toward the sheriff, waiting for him to speak, to laugh it off, to reassert control. But the sheriff hesitated, just long enough, and that hesitation spread like a crack through the crowd. Someone reached for the rope, almost without realizing they were doing it. The knot loosened under trembling fingers. The tension broke. Clara's body dropped slightly as the rope slackened, and hands rushed forward, hands that had been idle moments ago, to catch her before she hit the ground. The crowd shifted, murmurs rising, but the cowboy had already stepped back, his eyes never leaving her as she was lowered into the dust. He didn't smile. He didn't look around for approval. He simply turned, as if the moment had already passed for him. Clara collapsed to her knees the second the rope fell away, her arms dropping lifelessly at her sides as she struggled to draw a full breath. The world around her blurred in and out, voices distant and unclear. But one thing remained steady: the shadow of the man who had spoken. Someone tried to lift her, another offered water, their urgency sudden and clumsy, as if they were trying to erase what had just happened by pretending they had always cared. The sheriff stepped down from the porch, his expression tight, searching for words that would make him sound in control again, but none came, because the truth had already settled into the dust between them. It had only taken one man to break what an entire town had allowed. The cowboy didn't stay near her. He didn't kneel or ask questions or wait for thanks. He stood a few steps away, watching just long enough to see that she was breathing, that the color was slowly returning to her face. Clara lifted her head slightly, her eyes finding him through the haze. For a moment, it felt like the entire world narrowed to that single connection, her fragile, uncertain gaze and his quiet, unwavering one. She tried to speak, but no words came. She didn't need them. He gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, as if acknowledging something unspoken between them, and then he turned away. The crowd parted without being asked, stepping back as he walked through, their earlier certainty replaced with something heavier, something closer to shame. No one stopped him. No one followed. They just watched as he disappeared down the same road he had come from, his figure shrinking into the heat until he was nothing more than a distant outline against the horizon. Behind him, the town remained, quieter now, changed in a way no one would admit out loud. Clara was helped to her feet, her body weak but alive, her presence a reminder of what had almost been lost. And somewhere deep in that silence, a question lingered, one no one dared to answer. Why had it taken a stranger to do what they all knew was right?